Yo, what's up, guys? This is Seth Guttman, and today we're going to be previewing the first round of the Major League Baseball playoffs in 2023. Uh, Obviously, one of my favorite days of the year. Now, I won't lie, I much preferred the baseball postseason with the one-game wild card instead of the expanded three-game sets, especially because it means we have to listen to more of ESPN's lousy broadcasts. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's more baseball for our eyeballs, so we'll deal with it. So obviously, we're going to preview these four series. Hopefully, they are as entertaining as I expect. Um, the first one we're going to go over here is Texas versus Tampa. The Texas Rangers, who on the last day of the season completely gave away the division that they had led for most of the season um, by not scoring a single run against Seattle. Now, granted, it was George Kirby, who's a very talented pitcher, on the mound, but still, if you got a division on the line, the team you're facing has really nothing to play for but pride. You got to score more than one run. That's just my opinion there. But they had three cracks there, and they only won one game in that series. Whatever. That's a little bit off topic, but yes, Texas now has to travel to the Trop to face the Tampa Bay Rays, who had an unbelievable April, but have dealt with so many injuries and a bit of adversity along the way here. If you just name the amount of players, the quality of players that they're without right now between Shane McClanahan, Drew Rasmussen, and Jeffrey Springs, which were 3/5 of their expected rotation coming into the year, all extremely high level quality pitchers. Then you have Jason Adam, one of the better relievers in the game. Doesn't look like he's going to be available. Then you got Brandon Lau, who's done for the year. You've got Wander Franco, who obviously had a scandal that we will not get into, but yeah, that's a tough situation. And then Luke Raley, someone who really broke out for them as a really nice platoon bat against right-handed pitching, he's done. So, you just add all that up. Meanwhile, I don't know how healthy Rosarena and Yandy Diaz are. They've both been dealing with some nicks and bruises over the last week or so. So the Rays come in shorthanded, a bunch of unproven rookies they'll probably have to thrust into action, especially in the middle infield. And I mean, hey, there's still a quality team that won 99 games. So, the Rays find a way, and that's just the way they operate. So going into this series, Tampa has, I think, the decided pitching advantage, as usual. Tyler Glass now will get the ball in game one, and then we'll find out. I believe Eflin will probably get the ball in game two, and then Savali if there is a game three. I don't know if they officially announced the game two starter yet, but we know Glass now will be going today. As for Texas, Jordan Montgomery will get the ball in game one. Nate Eovaldi should, I would think, get the ball in game two, and then who the heck knows who would get the ball in game three, as the Rangers have dealt as well with a bunch of pitching injuries. Jacob deGrom has missed the majority of the season. Max Scherzer, who they acquired from the Mets at the trade deadline, is done for the year. And you have a guy like John Gray, who just went down with, I believe, a forearm issue. So they've been dealing with enough starting pitching injuries there where you don't know who would officially be the guy in a game three. I guess it could be Andrew Heaney. It could be Dane Dunning. I don't know what his rest situation is. Or it could just be a bullpen game. And with Texas, that would not be smart. So I would assume it would probably be Heaney in a game three. And that, none of these situations would be ideal for them. So I kind of alluded to it, but if you're not familiar with the 2023 Texas Rangers, their bullpen is an absolute disaster. If their bullpen could have just been competent and not a complete dumpster fire, they probably would have been the number one seed in the American League. That is how stark of a difference their bullpen made during this season. On the other side, you have Tampa Bay, who, as always, pieces together a bullpen of arms that they find through, waiver claims and undervalued trades, and some mainstays that you'll know, like Pete Fairbanks and Colin Poche. But an example of what Tampa Bay does, they traded for Robert Stevenson, who kind of underachieved, I would say, as a Reds pitcher. He had some flashes, but they took him and they turned him into a quality middle reliever. So that's just what the Tampa Bay Rays do. So the bullpen advantage goes to Tampa. Starting pitching, I would say, goes to Tampa. Glasnow has postseason experience, is a very dominant arm when he has his A game going. Eflin also had postseason experience last year with Philly, although for them he pitched out of the bullpen. And then Savali, he has experience in the playoffs, but just don't look up what he did last year in Game 5 against the Yankees. That was not a great start for him. As for Texas, Jordan Montgomery and Nate Eovaldi, not only do they have postseason experience, especially Eovaldi, but both of them have pitched plenty in the Trop, so it's not going to be foreign territory for them. They know the Rays. They'll know all these hitters. They'll know the environment. They won't be intimidated. The bigger concern I would have is Nate Eovaldi missed, like a month and a half, right? So he has just come back within the last few weeks, and he's still, I think, getting stretched out, right? So he's at around like 80 to 86 pitches. Obviously, in the postseason, in a do or die, they'll stretch him as far as they need to. But what kind of quality innings are you going to get from him? And in his last outing of the year against Seattle, he gave up 7 earned runs. And the start before that, he gave up 5. So, even if you can get some distance, are you going to actually still be in the game? And as we alluded to, you want to stay away from this Texas bullpen if you can. So getting innings is dire, and I just don't know if Eovaldi can give that to you right now. When you hand the ball over to the Rangers bullpen, Aroldis Chapman, who has already given up a back-breaking home run in the postseason to the Rays before, he's he's always like lighting a fire, and who the hell knows, what it's gonna burn down. Sometimes it works, but some other times it doesn't. Jose Leclerc has actually been one of the better stories over the last few months here. Someone who I honestly completely forgot about, and yeah, he's had a decent year. I would guess that he is going to be getting most of the high leverage, and then after that, I don't know. Will Smith has blown so many saves in the second half of the year, and I don't know who else in this bullpen you can really trust. It's just not been. It's not been an advantage for Texas at all this year. And yeah, so offensively, Texas is really, really good. They made 2 big signings last offseason when they brought in Corey Seager and Marcus Semien to really try to restart this new iteration of the Texas Rangers. And then you add in guys like Josh Young. You have guys who really blossomed this year, like Jonah Heim and Leodis Taveras. And then obviously they've got 2 really quality catchers in Mitch Garver and Jonah Heim, and Adolis Garcia and Nate Lowe. Like the lineup is very deep and it's very quality. Sometimes you get a little worried when a team is carried by their bats to overcompensate for their pitching, and Texas is like the banner team for that. Right? Philly last year, I feel like, is really shrouding people's opinions when it comes to, the offensive reliant team going into the postseason. And I think the Phillies maybe were a little bit more, pitching quality than people give them credit for when you got guys like Wheeler and Nola, who pitched pretty well for them, even though he's kind of regressed this year. But Tampa, because of the injuries, they're going to be thrusting some guys that you wouldn't really expect into the limelight. So they've got a bunch of rookies. Who even knows which one will be given the assignment or even put on the roster? We'll find that out tomorrow. But you've got Curtis Mead, you've got Junior Caminero, you've got Basabe. I don't even know how to pronounce his first name. But you've got all these guys who have so little experience, and because of all the uncertainty, are any of these guys ready for the moment, or is it just going to be overwhelming for them? I don't know. But Tampa is not afraid to thrust those rookies into the spotlight. I remember when they threw Shane McClanahan into a postseason game as a rookie, and he gave up a big home run to Giancarlo Stanton. So they're not afraid to, and they'll always put their their young players in the best position to succeed because they're Tampa, and that's what they do. Um, but yeah, like they've got so many quality players, and they're always going to mix and match with platoons. So in game one, expect them to go heavy with the right-handers against Jordan Montgomery. Expect to see Isaac Paredes. Expect to see Harold Ramirez in their lineup, and we'll see what they do with the middle infield with the youngsters. Um, but yeah, Tampa I think is considerably the favorite in this series, mostly just because of the way they play. Right, their bullpen is a massive advantage over Texas. They have a known quantity in a third starter. Forget what happened last year in Game 5 for Cleveland. Savali is a quality pitcher that's going to give you a shot, and I think Glasnow and Eflin are obviously great pitchers. And not to take anything away from Montgomery because he's had a great year. Um, but Evaldi, because of the injury stuff and, who knows how much distance he's willing to give, that would be a concern for me if I was Texas. I think Tampa's the pretty clear favorite in this series. I would take Tampa. I also don't love, the vibes with the Rangers over the last month of the year where they completely gave away that division that was theirs. I think they were up like 6 or 7 games not that long ago. Texas, unfortunately, this season looks like it's gone from they might be the team to beat to they might be home by the division series. And that is my prediction. I think Tampa's going to win this. If I had to guess, I would probably take them in 2. Just being completely honest there. I don't think Texas has the right mix right now, and trusting a bullpen like that in October, you'll never get me to do that. Just never going to happen. We now move on to, in my opinion, the most interesting series in the wild card round, which is the Toronto Blue Jays and the Minnesota Twins. Um, so obviously everyone knows about the Twins' ineptitude in October. It's been since 2004 that the Minnesota Twins last won a postseason game. They've lost 18 consecutive playoff games, 13 of them to the New York Yankees. I would say, thank God they can finally avoid the Yankees in the division round, but if you look at who's calling the games, it's Michael Kay and Alex Rodriguez. So no matter what, they cannot avoid the Yankees, even if they tried. But all joking aside, they go into this postseason as probably the team that nobody thinks can make any noise in the American League. And if you really dig into it and really look at what they have going for them, I'm not so sure that that's the case. Especially in these, in a short series, a best of 3 where they'll have home field advantage. The Twins really have a really good pitching staff set up for them. You got Sonny Gray, who's in contention for the Cy Young. He'll be going in Game 2. In Game 1 will be Pablo Lopez, who they acquired from the Marlins this past offseason. And he's had, an up and down year, I would say. But if you look at the advanced stat profile, he's pitched better than the underlying numbers. The underlying numbers would say that he's pitched better than the surface level stats. And he's struck out over 200 batters. He's a real quality pitcher, and I think he'll give him a good shot to win, especially against Toronto's heavy right-handed order. And then in Game 3, I guess they kind of have options there. I don't know if they would go with Joe Ryan. I don't know if they'd go with Bailey Ober. But they have 2 really quality options that they can turn to in an elimination game. And also, if you're a Twins fan, if you make it to Game 3, that means you finally won a playoff game. So even if you get eliminated, no one can use the losing streak thing anymore. So that's, I guess, a consolation prize, but not one that any Twins fan really wants to hear about. But let me talk about some names, if you're not familiar with the Minnesota Twins this year, that you probably don't know a lot about. A few of them are 3 rookies who have been, 3 of the more unheralded players in baseball this year. First off, we'll start with Edward Julian, who is pretty much the replacement for Luis Arias, who they traded for Pablo Lopez. And he has done an awesome job, just a remarkable job. Against right-handed pitching, which they'll see in Game 1 against Kevin Gausman, he's got an 898 OPS. Just punishes right-handed pitching, a really patient hitter. but a patient hitter who has power. Um, and then another rookie that, I mean, I don't think anybody talks about at all is Matt Wallner. And Matt Wallner just absolutely clobbers right-handed pitching. He's got a 970 OPS against righties with 12 home runs. He's someone who, not a lot of people know about, and he is someone you're going to want as a platoon guy that can just crush right-handed pitching. And then Royce Lewis, one of the fun stories in baseball this year, as long as he is healthy enough to go. He's had such a weird season. Former top prospect, who is the king of the Grand Slam. I believe he's had like 4 Grand Slams this year. It seems like every single time you throw on a Twins game, he's hitting a 3-run home run or a Grand Slam. Just a really impressive hitter this year, just crushing it, and someone that as long as he's on the field, you'll be very excited to have out there. And then it seems like, based off the last reports that I've seen, Carlos Correa should be available. That'll obviously, you'd prefer to have him than not. Correa, obviously, with someone who has a lot of postseason experience with the Astros. And yeah, I don't know about Buxton. I don't know. He hasn't really done much this year, even when he's played. But that's another guy who, I would say it's better to have him than not. It's probably a fair assessment. I don't know if he would start. I don't know if he'd come off the bench. I don't know if he's even going to be on the playoff roster at all. That's just one other name to keep in mind. But then, the regular guys like Jorge Polanco returns again. He's been with these Twins teams for a while. And so has Max Kepler. But Max Kepler has really had, I would say, probably his best year in the big leagues. Just a real nice breakout campaign after a lot of people wrote him off. And yeah, I mean, they're a quality offense. They're not the Bomba squad from 2019, the one that set all those home run records, but they're a quality team that I think is going under the radar, and one that you should not sleep on. Right? They have, I think they're top 7 in OPS, right? Like they're not a team that you can just waltz right over. Now, obviously, things can change in October, and the narrative with the Twins is that the bright lights come on and they don't hit. I don't know if that's necessarily fair, but that is what has happened in the past. Now we'll go towards the Toronto Blue Jays, which, I mean, one of the weirder teams in baseball. Like, on paper, the Toronto Blue Jays are as talented as anyone. And for whatever reason, they haven't fully lived up to their potential. They did make the playoffs. It did take them all the way to the wire to get there, but they did not compete for the division really at all the entire season. And it's most of the names that you remember, especially offensively. It's still Vlad Guerrero Jr., Bo Bichette, it's still George Springer and Alejandro Kirk, Matt Chapman, right? Those guys are still there as the mainstays in the offense. A very right-handed lineup. The Blue Jays decided we need to get a little bit more left-handed, and we need to get a little bit more defensive. So they traded away Teoscar Hernandez to Seattle. They traded away Lourdes Gurriel Jr. to Arizona in that very strange Dalton Varsho trade. And Varsho has been pretty disappointing, I would say, for the Blue Jays as that left-handed player to throw in the outfield. Defensively, that was the main reason, but offensively, he's really taken a step back. And then they brought in Brandon Belt, who, is a solid quality player who has, once again, a lot of postseason experience. And then Kevin Kiermaier as well, another guy, plenty of postseason experience, plays good defense, left-handed bat. I guess Davis Schneider is kind of like one of the fun stories of baseball this year. I don't know if he's going to play much, but, just a guy that kind of carried them for a little bit where it looked like things might be going south. So the Blue Jays, offensively, the biggest thing that has hampered them this year, outside of, Bichette missed some time with injuries. It seems like Springer for a while looked like he really took a step back and regressed. Vlad Guerrero Jr. didn't really have the season I think people were expecting from him. But the main thing was, for whatever reason, no matter how many hits they would have in a game, they were having a historically bad season with runners in scoring position. Now, I haven't seen an updated I haven't seen updated stats on that within the last month or two, but for a while there, they were like historically bad. Like it wasn't some sort of anomaly. It wasn't just something that you think, oh, they never get the hit with runners in scoring position. No, they literally never did, for whatever reason, and that was costing them some games. Pitching wise, the Blue Jays are surprisingly maybe the deepest pitching staff in all baseball right now. Kevin Gausman just what an unbelievable signing that was for the Blue Jays. With his splitter, he's just such a intimidating power right-handed pitcher. Strikes a lot of guys out. And yeah, just a great addition for them. He's been the frontline pitcher that the Blue Jays desperately needed. And then Chris Bassett, it kind of started off a little hairy there in April. Got a little nervous that the pitch clock rules were going to torpedo things, and then he ended the year just where he pretty much was last year. A really quality, solid pitcher, someone that you can rely on to give you innings and give you quality innings at that. Now, I do have some slight concerns about whether the postseason would bring back some of those pitch clock issues, where he was a pitcher before the pitch clock, like in the past, who would hold the ball a long time and use it as I think more as like a strategy purpose, right? To kind of gather himself, make the pitcher wait and wait and wait, and then deliver the ball. Has he fully adapted to that in a pressure environment of the postseason, or is that something that could crop back up? That's something you could definitely look for. And then Jose Barrios going back to Minnesota, where his career started. I've never been the biggest Barrios fan. I've been pretty, outspoken with that, but he's still, a quality major league pitcher that'll give you a chance to win most nights. Can't say that I trust him entirely, but you can do much worse, as you'll see with some other teams in this field. And then you've got two left-handed pitchers who have their moments, especially Hyun-Jin Ryu, who has had a really solid career stateside, mostly with the Dodgers, but he's had his moments with the Blue Jays as well. And Yusei Kikuchi, who it's kind of, you don't know what you're gonna get. Some days it's good, some days it's not, but for the most part, he's an innings eater that can give you a decent start every now and then. So they've got a handful of options there, and then a very, very deep bullpen. Jordan Romano, I was dealt with a lot of injuries and hasn't been super sharp since he's been back. But just top to bottom, a lot of different arms that they can throw at you from both sides of both sides of the mound, both sides of the rubber. God, I really don't know why I said it like that. Both sides of the rubber. And yeah, it's an interesting team. One where I think they're on paper just as good as any other team in the American League, and I think it's kind of crazy. Like, I was looking at the American League pennant odds, and the Blue Jays were the least. I guess maybe it's just because they're the 6th seed. I don't know. They had the lowest odds to win the pennant, and it was like plus 800, plus 750, something like that. Just an absurd number that I don't personally understand. I don't think there's a heavy favorite in the American League. I don't even think there's a favorite. I think it's the most wide open the American League has been since 2014. And in that 2014 postseason, if you remember, it was the Kansas City Royals and the Baltimore Orioles advancing to the ALCS, and nobody had that. I think the most common pick was like the Angels and Tigers, I want to say, something like that. I think the Oakland A's were also a popular team. I think the Orioles and the Royals were the least picked teams, and those were the two that wound up advancing to the ALCS. So yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities here. And Toronto, if we want to believe in the whole runners in scoring position is a luck-based stat and not a skill-based stat, maybe, being so bad with runners in scoring position for most of the season was just a way for the Blue Jays to save all those, hits with RISP for the postseason. It's been my gut feeling, and personally, as a Yankee fan, someone who does not particularly like the Blue Jays, I hope that's not the case. But that's just something that I personally feel. It feels like the Blue Jays have just been building up for this moment, and I still have some questions about them against right-handed pitching, especially considering how right-handed dependent they are. But some of those hitters are good against both sides. So Vlad and Bichette are not right-handed hitters that are going to be intimidated by any right-handed pitching. But the Twins are going to throw some really high-level quality right-handed pitching at them, and they're going to need to adjust to that. So bullpen-wise, I guess I kind of skipped over that for Minnesota. But yeah, their bullpen is solid as well. Not especially they've been really good over the last month of the year. But yeah, they're just a solid unit with a lot of arms they can throw at you. I know they just got Brock Stewart back from injury. I really liked him earlier this year before he got hurt. And they got Duran, they got Emilio Pagan, they got Griffin Jacks. They got just a bunch of arms they can throw at you. Even Chris Paddock, I mean, I don't know if he's even going to make the postseason roster, but I kind of liked how his fast book looked in the one outing that I saw. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see who comes out on top here. Kind of just feel in my gut that it's gonna be Toronto. Hope it's Minnesota, but just if I had to make a pick here, I would go with Minnesota. I'd go with Toronto, and probably in 3 games. I don't know. Predicting the American League playoffs this year is an impossible chore. All these teams are so close. There's really very little separating them. And I think, listen, Minnesota has a history of not winning postseason games. I don't think this team should be treated to that same standard. I think they're just as good as most of the teams in this field. Just, that's just, when you have a rotation like they have, and a lot of these other teams do not have the rotation depth that they do, that's going to give you a chance. And yeah, I think do not count the Twins out. It would be the moral of the story there. Now we move on to the National League, and we'll talk about Arizona versus Milwaukee. So first we'll talk about the bad news here, as Brandon Woodruff, it looks like his shoulder injury has resurfaced and he's probably done for the season. That's a real bummer, as Woodruff, despite the injury that he dealt with, and I was very nervous. I have a common saying that shoulder injuries end careers, and when he started dealing with that shoulder injury, I got very nervous. And then in the second half of this year, he was just killing it. Over the last month, he had a 1.67 ERA. In the month of August, it was a 3.45. Like, he was pitching fine, right? It didn't look like he was really affected by the shoulder injury, and then, I guess, out of the blue, they have to shut him down. So instead, Freddie Peralta will get the ball in Game 2. A quality pitcher, someone that you can really trust, but, not as dominant and as consistent as Woodruff has been in his career. Corbin Burns will get the ball in Game 1, one of the more dominant pitchers in baseball. And the guy he gets to go up against, and this is just fascinating. So the Arizona Diamondbacks this past weekend decided to use both Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly in an attempt to lock up a postseason spot. They lost all 3 games they played against Houston, but despite that, still made the playoffs. So they got the help they needed because the Cubs just utterly collapsed, and the Reds could not take advantage of the situation. And so because they used Gallen and because they used Merrill Kelly, getting the ball in Game 1 will be rookie Brandon Pfaadt. Not exactly the most optimal situation here, especially going up against Corbin Burns. This is a game, though, if you're Milwaukee, you absolutely have to win. If the Brewers were to lose this game, then the Diamondbacks are sitting pretty. No Brandon Woodruff in this series, and then the Diamondbacks can throw out their 2 best starters in Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly in Games 2 and 3, looking to take it and then head off to LA for the second round. But yeah, Arizona, a team that I think surprised a lot of people this year, including myself. Maybe a year or two a little bit early, with a lot of young talent that has not played at this postseason level before. Corbin Carroll, runaway winner, I think, of the National League Rookie of the Year. I guess unless we count Kodai Senga, but that's kind of cheating. Um, but yeah, just a five-tool athlete like you heard of. And then, yeah, their offense kind of a little up and down, very reliant on speed, not the most powerful lineup in the world. They do have someone like Christian Walker who can get red hot and hit a bunch of home runs. Um, but they're a team that really is going to rely on getting on base and causing some havoc and trying to string together some hits. They really struggled to score runs this weekend against Houston, against some high-level pitching, desperate high-level pitching. And the Brewers are going to throw that in waves as well with one of the more dominant bullpens in baseball. So that can be a concern. Unless someone decides to really get hot and carry the load, it might be difficult for them to score runs against the Brewers' level of pitching. Um, Other thing to be concerned about, the Diamondbacks' bullpen, not good, not reliable at all. They did trade for Paul Sewald at the deadline, but outside of that, it's just a very mishmash of guys who haven't done it, and I don't know if they will do it. Um, I've asked this before, and I kind of think it's true. Has the Diamondbacks ever had a quality bullpen? Just ever. Like, even the year when they won the World Series in 2001, they had to use Randy Johnson on no days rest to save the World Series and keep Arizona in that game because Byung-Hyun Kim, their closer at the time, just kept blowing save after save in that World Series. So yeah, it seems like a rite of passage. Arizona just cannot, for the life of them, have a safe and trustworthy bullpen to close out a game. And just like Texas against Tampa, it's the opposite with Milwaukee. Milwaukee, pretty much just known at this point from taking pieces from nowhere and turning them into quality relievers. Now, the one thing that you do have to question, though, is despite how they've done in the regular season, a lot of these guys have never pitched in the playoffs before. Honestly, I don't know if most of them have at all. Devin Williams has, and he's a really quality, solid closer. But the rest of them, I don't know. Like Joel Payamps, who is one of the better stories, under the radar pickup in a trade last year, comes to the Brewers and for whatever reason just really finds a home there, becomes their lockdown setup guy. But he's shown a bit of a bit of rust lately. He's been he's been a bit leaky, and I don't know how he'll react to the postseason stage, as well as the number of other guys they have in the pen. It's almost like the faceless Brewers pen. They just find guys, pluck them out of nowhere, and it works. If that's going to work in the postseason, they're going to need this bullpen to be as locked down as it was for most of the regular season. The big question mark that I have as well, now that Woodruff is out and probably done for the postseason, who would get the ball in Game 3? Probably Wade Miley, I'd guess. Just knowing how the Brewers operate and not being afraid to do things a little bit outside the box, I wouldn't rule out the idea of them just bullpenning a Game 3. But I think the more critical thing here is the Brewers just got to wrap this up in 2. Because the Diamondbacks will have Merrill Kelly in Game 3, and no matter what kind of pitching combo the Brewers throw together, whether that's Miley or a bullpen game, Merrill Kelly will probably have the advantage there. So I would definitely say if the Brewers are going to get this done, get it done in 2, where you have your 2 best pitchers on the mound. That would definitely be my suggestion. As for the Brewers lineup, it's kind of weird, right? Like, they're not a good offensive team, but they do have some quality pieces, especially pieces that have experienced the postseason, like Carlos Santana, Christian Yelich. Mark Canha really hasn't had a lot of postseason experience, but he's played in a couple games there with Oakland and the Mets. they're kind of a platoon team. They try to piece it together, but at the end of the day, they're really only going to win with pitching and defense. That's what they do. That's how they try to win. They're trying to beat you 2-1. That's really how they're trying to play games. And if they luck into a day where Christian Yelich hits a 3-run home run and they can score a grand total of 4 runs and blow you out 4-0, they'll take it. But yeah, they're a team that's going to try to just beat you in a low-scoring game. And in a lot of ways, Arizona does not have that same margin for error because their bullpen is not great. So Arizona really needs to take Milwaukee into a place where they're uncomfortable, which is trying to get some extra runs on the board and make this more high scoring, because that's just not something that Milwaukee really can or wants to do. But yeah, obviously advantage goes to Milwaukee pitching wise in game 1 with Woodruff versus Fat, and if they can take game 1 as they should, then I think the Brewers are in decent shape. But they lose game 1, then all hell breaks loose. I think Arizona then is looking pretty with their 2 best pitchers on the mound. I'm taking Milwaukee here. I just don't trust Arizona's offense. Not that I trust Milwaukee's much more, but if I'm going to trust, a team in this series, I can't go with Arizona's bullpen. It's just unreliable. The offense really inexperienced and nothing really flashy. I think Milwaukee has just enough with some real grinded out type of bats from Yelich, Santana, and Canna. Give me the Brewers. I'll take it in 2. I could see it sneaking through to 3, but they got to win game 1. They lose game 1, then you can change my pick to Arizona in 3. Then we'll get the last series here, the Phillies and the Marlins. So the Phillies and Marlins intra-division rivals here. The Phillies obviously coming off of their magical run last year in the postseason, looking to do it again, and see their buddies, the Atlanta Braves, in the NLDS with a win. The Phillies really are a similar team as they were last year, just a few new faces. Nothing really crazy. Obviously, Trey Turner was their big signing in the offseason. Started off horribly, just a terrible start, and then he got red scorching hot. Once the Philly fans had that fun cheering him idea instead of booing him like they usually do. Their offense is obviously very talented. They can put a ton of runs on the board. And a lot of the question marks are the same, right? Rotation-wise, Zach Wheeler is that bulldog, that guy that you trust to go out there and get the job done. But Aaron Nola has not been the quality of pitcher that you would expect, especially in a walk year where usually you think you're going to get the most out of him. He's been a little bit better in the second half, a little bit better of late, but man, it's really hard to know what kind of quality Aaron Nola you're going to get this year. And then in game 3, I don't know who they're going to go with. I guess they can go with Taijuan Walker. You can go with Ranger Suarez. You can try to piece it together. But yeah, it's pretty clear that the Phillies are going to have the advantage when it comes to offense in this series. And then even if they get to a game 3, I think they'll still have the pitching advantage because I just don't know who would start game 3 for Miami. Right? So they've got Jesus Luzardo, who's been one of the breakout pitchers in baseball for the Marlins this year, and Braxton Garrett, who's been pretty good, not as good as the surface level stats would tell you, but he's had a solid year for the Fish. He's not someone who you can just completely overlook, but he's got a 4.51 expected ERA. A lot of his advantage comes from the fact he doesn't walk batters, in the 97th percentile in that, but he gives up high quality hard contact. And his strikeouts are slightly above average, but nothing really to write home about. And then pitching-wise for Game 3, right? Sandy Alcantara, who was their ace in the previous years, won the Cy Young last year. He really did not have a great season, although he's had his moments. And the one thing that you got to give him credit for is no matter what, he gives you innings. And this time of year, you cannot underestimate how valuable it is to have a pitcher who's just going to give you 6, 7, 8 innings no matter what. And not having him really hurts. And they don't even have their talented rookie Yuri Perez, um, who I mean I don't know if they would have trusted him in this spot, but they probably wouldn't have had much other of a choice. My guess is they would probably give the ball to Edward Cabrera in Game 3 and then have a really short leash. Maybe he would only get to face the lineup one time through and then go to the bullpen. I don't know. It feels like it would be a really tough task to piece that game together, but it'd be one that they would try to do. Um, but yeah, so to get there, they're gonna have to win one of these first two games. Uh, and you know, it's obviously very possible. The Marlins actually, I think, won one more game than they lost against the Phillies in the regular season. They're still plenty capable, and you know it'll be interesting to see the health of Luis Arias, who's missed a handful of games the last month of the year. It sounds like he's going to be ready to go. Another thing I would watch when I was watching the Marlins over the weekend, Josh Bell looked like he could barely move out there. Still got some hits, right? He still helped them make the playoffs, but I don't know just how healthy he is. Um, you know, they made some really smart, shrewd pickups there. You know, Josh Bell has been a real nice addition to the middle of that lineup, as has Jake Berger, who I mean, I don't know what the White Sox were doing with that guy. Like the fact that he would go long stretches on the bench for a team that can barely score runs as is. I don't understand what they were doing there, but you know, gift for the Marlins because he's taken it to another level there. He's always stung the ball. He's always hit for high exit velocity, and now with the Marlins, it looks like he's got a real place to flourish, and he's under team control for another 5 years. So you know the Marlins are real set with Jake Berger. They're a real nice addition to that lineup, and Jorge Soler, who's done it with the Braves, he's done it with the Cubs. He's a quality power bat that can hit the long ball at any point. And even Jazz Chisholm, you know, definitely a little bit of a disappointment for the guy on the cover for MLB The Show. But he's really started to play a lot better in September, and I think that's, you know, if they're going to pull off the upset here, Jazz is the kind of guy who can get red hot and carry an offense when he's going really strong. So yeah, I think the Marlins are really going to need to string together more runs than you know than maybe their people thought they were capable of. But yeah, that's really the big key I think in this series is just match the Phillies offense because the Phillies are gonna do their darndest to load up the scoreboard with runs as well. I think the bullpens are both kind of quality, especially Marlins added David Robertson, who hasn't been great. You know, he's kind of lost the role as the closer, but he's still someone who's pitched in a lot of postseason games. And they've got a lot of lefties in this bullpen. Tanner Scott, been a solid pitcher that they got from the Orioles a couple years ago. Andrew Nardi kind of come out of nowhere and been a really nice pitcher for them. AJ Puck has even had his moments as well. So, you know, they've got plenty of good arms in that bullpen. And then for the Phillies, Craig Kimbrell definitely been up and down, I think it's fair to say, but he has plenty of postseason experience. And, I mean, a lot of these guys did pitch in the postseason last year. Then you have Jose Alvarado, who, you know, when he is on, he might be one of the filthiest pitchers in baseball. And then you got Greg Soto, who throws absolute gas. Seranthony Dominguez, who was great for them in the postseason last year, but has kind of had a disappointing year in the regular season. And then they also acquired Michael Lorenzen at the trade deadline, and he'll probably pitch out of the bullpen, which he's done in the past, so it's not something foreign for him. And then Chris Sanchez, who really blossomed this year for them out of the rotation in the rotation, is going to get transitioned to the bullpen as well. So there's a lot of arms that the Phillies can throw at you. Don't know how I would feel about Walker or Suarez in a game 3, but compared to what the Marlins can go with, they would have the considerable advantage there. So this series, you know, definitely not one where I think the Phillies should be considered a runaway favorite. A lot, I think, will depend on the health of Arias. A lot will depend on the health of Josh Bell and his if he has any sort of lingering leg injury. It looked like he can barely move the last few days of the season. I'm going to go with the Phillies here. If I were to pick an upset, and I would consider, the Marlins over the Phillies and the Diamondbacks over Brewers, I would consider them both pretty significant upsets. If I were to pick one, I'd probably take the Marlins. I'd probably be more liable to take the Marlins just because they know the Phillies personnel. It's not going to be a surprise when they go up against these guys. And I just, obviously the game 3 would be a little scary because they don't really have the starter to go with. But hey, man, it's the postseason. In an elimination game in the postseason, you're kind of all hands on deck anyway. So I don't think it would be a real foreign concept for them to just piece it together and figure it out as they go, and then hope for the best, and then figure it out what you're going to do in game 1 once you get there. I'm going to take the Phillies to win the series in 3, but like I said, I think it's going to be a closer series than some might realize. So that's going to be it for my preview of the wild card round of the postseason. For those of you who want to know, I am all in on the Atlanta Braves to win it all. I've said for months now, at least 3 or 4 months, that I thought they were considerably the best team in baseball, and the only team I think really would have been close is Tampa if all of their pitchers didn't get hurt. But yeah, I think the Braves are far and away the best team on paper. They set the record, 501 slugging percentage in a season. Like almost every single player in their lineup has like 30 home runs. I actually did some calculations, and their team OPS is the 3rd highest in the last 20 years of any team, only behind the 2003 Boston Red Sox and the 2019 Astros in the juiced ball year. Their team OPS is higher than the 04 Red Sox, the 09 Yankees, the Bomba Squad Twins, like just the 2017 Astros, like just a lot of really quality, high level offensive teams, and the Braves this year are even better than them. It's one of those things where when you have that deep of an offensive lineup, you can have a guy or two go into a deep slump, and it doesn't matter because the rest of the lineup is picking up the slack for you. Obviously, no matter who they face, it's going to be someone that knows them. They'll face someone from their division in either the Phillies or the Marlins. But I just, man, if as long as Max Fried comes back healthy, I think they're going to be in good shape there. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to really stretch this out and make it into a full thing, but just quickly, I guess I'll give some quick hit thoughts on the other 3 teams with a bye. The Dodgers, obviously, loaded offense, a really good quality bullpen like Andrew Friedman always puts together. But the real concern is the rotation good enough to get to where they want to go? Kershaw has dealt with what it seems like some injuries here, and it feels like, can he get to the finish line? I'm not even sure. Lance Lynn, they picked him up because they thought, man, we know he's giving up a lot of home runs, but he can still strike out a lot of guys. And he's a solid pitcher with some postseason experience. Is he the most trustworthy guy out there? Probably not, but he was definitely better than the alternatives. And then you got a very talented rookie in Bobby Miller, who's really impressed me from the jump. How would he handle the stage? I guess we'll find out. And then, I don't even know what else they would do with a game 4. Feels like they would almost assuredly try to piecemeal it with some sort of bullpen game. But yeah, like if Kershaw cannot get through the postseason, like his back, is acting up or some other injury ailment, I just don't know how you piece this together, right? Like is Emmett Sheehan or Ryan Yarbrough or I can't pronounce his name, is Ryan Pepiot. Like, can these guys piece it together and get the Dodgers to the promised land? I don't know. Like, their offense is so loaded. Can it get them there? I don't know. Houston, obviously the defending champs, 2-time American League pennant winners in a row. you're going to have to knock them out to get the American League pennant. There's just no way that this team is going to go down easy. Their bullpen still, for my money, is the best in baseball. Loaded, deep bullpen, just quality right-handed arm after quality right-handed arm. Rotation-wise, though, they're definitely vulnerable. Justin Verlander was a great pickup for them, and lucky for them they got him because, without him, I don't know how they would fare rotation-wise. He's been really good since he came back, and he's just a guy who's done this rodeo enough times that you're not going to be intimidated. He's not going to be intimidated at all. Framber Valdez, another guy who's been a really good pitcher for them for a few years now, but has kind of struggled in the second half, especially his last start there against, God, who was it against? Arizona. He didn't look comfortable at all. He was walking guys. His body language looked off. Obviously, Arizona let him off the hook. He just hasn't been super sharp in the second half of the year. And then Christian Javier, who was really one of the big surprises of last season, who was unhittable. So unhittable that he was part of 2 no-hitters last year, including one in the World Series. The other one I was in attendance of. We don't need to talk about that. But yeah, Christian Javier has not been the same level of guy this year. He's still capable of missing bats, but it just feels like he's been getting hit a little bit harder, and it hasn't been the same fairy tale story for him as last year. And then in a Game 4, I don't know what the plan would be. Would it be J.P. France? Would it be Urquidy? I guess that would be another one where we would have to figure out as we go. But yeah, obviously, the names offensively. I'm not breaking any news to you. Really only the new face there is Jose Abreu, who essentially just replaces Yuli Gurriel as the reliable right-handed hitter in the middle of the lineup. So yeah, the Astros are solid. If there's one thing that you would want to poke a hole in, it's that rotation. But there's still going to be a tough out, and I think it's fair if people just say, until they lose the pennant, just going to assume that they're the favorites to win it again. I would not blame you one bit for thinking like that. And then we get to Baltimore. Really, I don't know, like the most impressive team during the season outside of Atlanta. They won 101 games. They're so young. They're so fun to watch. For the most part, they play really good defense and they can mash. They're just a really impressive offensive team. You got guys like Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman. You got rookie after rookie coming up like Erstad and Jordan Westberg. They're only going to go up from here. Like, this is not going to be the last you see of this Oriole team, especially once Jackson Holliday gets here. They're just not going anywhere at all. So pitching-wise, they're an interesting team because it's not like they have bad arms, right? Like, the top 2 guys in the rotation, Kyle Bradish has been really good, a really reliable pitcher for them. And then Grayson Rodriguez, who, when you're a top pitching prospect in baseball and you struggle, sometimes people are going to overreact and say, oh, this guy's a bust, let's forget about him. The Orioles, being smart and knowing how to not completely let the train get derailed, decided to send him down to AAA. And since he's come back, he has been awesome. He's been a new pitcher. He's clearly fixed whatever the issues are, and he's ready to go. And I think he'll be a quality pitcher. I'm just assuming he's getting Game 2. Bradish will get Game 1. Then it becomes interesting. So John Means just returned a few weeks ago from his recovery from his injury, and he's looked okay. He's definitely pitched more innings than I even expected. He's gone deeper into games. I expect him to be involved. I don't know necessarily if he's going to get a start, but I definitely expect him to be part of the pitching plan to victory. And then you got guys like Dean Kramer, who, he's okay. He's not the most reliable pitcher. He's going to give you some pretty ugly starts to go along with some okay starts. And then Kyle Gibson is just, innings eater, not really someone you really want to trust. But if if you have to give the ball to someone, I guess he's a veteran who's done it before, so could you do worse? I don't know, maybe. Um, Bullpen-wise is kind of interesting. Um, so Felix Bautista was the most dominant reliever in baseball until his injury, and it's just such a shame that he now needs Tommy John surgery. And not only are we done seeing him for this year, we're done seeing him from next year as well. So that just sucks, and it's a real shame for not just the Orioles, but for baseball in general, because that guy is just insane to watch. So instead, Yanir Cano takes over as the closer, and he has obviously also been a really good story, but one that I think has a shelf life. He's not nearly as dominant. He's more of a pitch to contact pitcher than Batista is, just blow you away with his crazy stuff. Um, and he's seen some regression, which was obviously going to come. He was never going to be flawless, but he's still, he's still a solid reliever, someone that I think you can trust. But is he locked down? I don't know. Let's see how he deals with the pressure. Um, and then, really, one of the X factors, I think, in all of the postseason, and maybe that's an exaggeration, I don't know. But Tyler Wells, who was a pitcher who I was a real big fan of, I thought he pitched awesome in the first half. I was a bit surprised when he got demoted, and it seemed like it was a combination of some arm fatigue, wanting to limit his innings, and some, I guess, regression at the time where they did it. And he got called back up, and he's been used as a reliever now for the last week of the year, and I thought he looked really good. The Orioles obviously can desperately use help there in the back of their bullpen. I think he could be a real weapon there. I don't know if they'd be willing to use him for multiple innings or if he'd be like a strictly one inning guy. But just as someone who at least looks the part, I think Wells could be someone who, he's not going to fill the shoes of Felix Bautista, but maybe he can lessen the blow of not having him just a little bit. And that's what the Orioles really need. In Game 3 and Game 4, they're not going to have the blow away starting pitcher that you can really trust. But I think, if they can have guys who just keep them in the game with a really solid offense that doesn't seem to die, even when they're down multiple runs, they're always seem to be in the game. This bullpen needs to hold their part of the bargain. And it'll be interesting to see if they can do that, because they have not been as locked down to end the season as they were in the first half of the year. And a lot of that is because Felix Bautista is done for the year. So yeah, that's going to be it. I know I've been rambling here longer than I probably even wanted to. But yeah, 2023 postseason begins today. Super excited for that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think the American League playoffs especially going to be a wild ride, unpredictable. Who knows who's going to come through? I think any of these teams could go on a run, even Minnesota. As crazy as that sounds, I think even Minnesota, based on their starting pitching and some of the quality arms they have in their bullpen, even them, I think, could go on a run. So let's enjoy it, folks. I'll be back to recap some of these games as the days go on. And let's enjoy the baseball. See you later, guys.